Hi guys, Sean here from digiDirect. Now today we're actually going to be covering a smartphone, and that's the Huawei P9 Android smartphone. Now the reason we're going to be talking about this phone is mainly because of its camera aspects, and the P9 actually has a camera that's designed by Leica, which is why we're going to be discussing it. Now for those who don't know, Leica is a very high-end camera manufacturer from Germany. They've been around for a long time, and they're really well known for their extremely high-quality optics. So to have a camera designed by Leica or co-designed by Leica on a smartphone is a pretty big deal. Now one thing that I want to say right off the bat is I'm not going to be touching on the phone aspects of this phone. I'm not going to talk about the operating system and all those kind of aspects. We're just going to be looking at the camera. And the camera is the main feature on this phone anyways, so that's mostly what you're going to want to know about this phone. So let's jump right in quickly with a look at the physical design of the phone before we get to the camera aspects. So it's a nice, slim, large phone. It has a 5.2-inch screen on the front. It's a nice, sharp, large screen. There's not a lot of physical buttons on the phone. There's an on-off power switch. There's a volume control, but most of the other buttons are going to be touchscreen controls. It does have a micro SD card slot for expandable storage. It has a USB-C charger at the bottom as well as a headphone jack. At the back, it does have a little fingerprint control which allows you to unlock the phone. But looking at the back of the phone here at the top is where we're most interested. That's the camera. And we can see it does have the Leica badging on it. It is even labeled as Summerit lens, which is one of the terms that Leica uses for their lenses. Now, one thing that's immediately apparent is that there are actually two lenses here on the camera. It's a dual lens camera. Now the idea behind this is that one of them is a regular camera. The other one, it's black and white only, or monochrome, which is another term for that. That's a look that Leica is very famous for, their classic monochrome look. Leica was involved in also the image processing from this camera, so it's going to give you that kind of classic Leica look that's very popular in terms of black and white. Also, it's supposed to capture a higher amount of detail than the color one, because that lack of a color filter allows for more detail, a little bit more dynamic range, and less noise. So you're going to get a little bit higher picture quality from the black and white. Now, even if you're using the color lens, you're still going to have a benefit from the dual lenses. It allows a couple extra modes, such as the shallow depth of field mode, which we'll touch on, and also it will allow better low light performance. So Huawei claims that the way that this works is it basically takes the information from both of the sensors in the lenses and combines them, giving you a resulting photo that has better low light performance, less noise. Now both of these lenses and sensors are 12 megapixels, and they have an aperture of 2.2, so a fairly bright aperture. It's going to let in a lot of light. They will shoot 1080p video footage, and they'll shoot 720 at up to 120 frames per second, which will allow you to do some slow motion. There is a camera on the front of the phone, so the front-facing camera, which is an 8 megapixel camera. That's what you'll use for selfies and so on. So let's dive right into the camera mode here and take a look at that. Now, the first thing that I'll say about the camera mode here is that there is a lot of control and a lot of options here. If you just like to take point and shoots, it'll still take great photos, but you definitely do have the ability to go in and tweak settings, manually do a lot of controls, and that's really what it's aimed at doing. So let's take a look here. So if we swipe from the left, we can access all of our different modes. And this is very reminiscent of the menu on the Leica T. So the Leica T is a camera system that Leica makes. It's a very clean system. Here we can access, our monochrome mode, video, panorama, time-lapse, all the different photo modes. We can swipe back to the main thing here, and if we swipe from the right, now we'll access our settings. We can adjust the camera grid, we can do touch capture, smile detection, object tracking, all these different types of settings. These are going to change a little bit depending on which mode you're in, but we can really get down and gritty with customizing it the way that we want to. Now when taking a picture, we can either use the touchscreen button, or we can use the volume control button on the top as a shutter button, or we can even use the fingerprint button on the back. If we hold our finger over that for a moment, it'll take a photo that way as well. Now one of my favorite aspects of the camera mode here is the exposure adjustment. It's really done very well. So we can obviously tap to adjust our focus, but when we do that, a small symbol beside the focus point, it's a picture of a sun, comes up. We can scroll our finger up and down on that, and that will adjust the exposure compensation, so we can easily make it a bit darker or a bit brighter or so on. But an even better way to do this, and this is where I think is really cool, is we can hold our finger for the focus point, the phone vibrates a little bit, and then we have a second control that we can drag off the focus point and this is the exposure control. So the focus point will remain where it is, but we drag the exposure control to a different area, and it will set the exposure of the photo based on that area. But this just allows a lot of flexibility over maintaining your exposure in your shots very quickly and very effectively. Next, let's touch on the Pro mode, and this is where we access all of our manual controls. So we access this by just swiping up on this little tab here at the near the bottom. Now we can get all of our manual controls and adjust them how we see fit. So we've got, metering modes, ISO, shutter speed, exposure compensation, focusing. We can even go to manual focus, so we can adjust the focusing ourselves. Auto white balance or one of the other white balance settings we can change. So a lot of control over the manual exposure. So we can really emphasize and get the photo set up the way we want. So when we're in the Pro mode or manual mode, we can swipe right to the settings, and now we have access to take raw photos. When you take a raw photo with this, it'll also save a JPEG. Now, one of my favorite modes here is the shallow depth of field mode, and we can access this at the top here. This takes advantage of the dual lenses. Because the imaging is coming from 2 points rather than 1, it can give a rough approximation of distance, which is what facilitates this mode. So what we do is we choose a focal point, and when we do that, we have a little slider at the side, which then allows us to change the aperture or the simulated aperture, and it will blur out items that are behind or in front of that, just like you would with a regular DSLR, for example. And we can go back and change that focus point and change the aperture after the fact. So you can adjust it later and save whichever kind of version of the file you like. You'll save it separately. You'll still have this file you can go back and adjust whenever you want. That's really, really cool. And it does a good job. It's very nice if you use it sparingly. I wouldn't recommend shooting at the highest, 0.95 all the time, because it can look a little bit artificial when you're doing that. But if you have a nice touch with it kind of around the middle, it can really put a nice, very natural looking shallow depth of field, which is something obviously very difficult to achieve with a smartphone. So overall, this is one of the best quality cameras that you're gonna find in a smartphone, which is what we would expect from a camera that has the Leica branding associated with it. It's really sharp, really nice quality photos. The monochrome look is excellent, really gives you that classic Leica look. Another strength is the abundance of manual controls in the photo mode. For someone who doesn't necessarily want to bring a DSLR around with them all the time, but they want to have a lot of control with them, this is going to really allow you to do that. So I think overall, the Huawei P9 is going to appeal to the same type of audience that the Leica brand in general appeals to. And that's someone who wants to go the extra mile to get the absolute highest quality photo that they can, and someone who likes a lot of manual control over their photos. Now, if that sounds like you, I recommend that you check out the Huawei P9. I think you'll really dig it. If you'd like to come in and try it out, see how it stacks up to your existing smartphone, come into one of our stores. We've got it in stock. We have stores in the Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Miranda, Chatswood, the Melbourne and Brisbane CBDs, and in Cannington, Western Australia. You can also order the Huawei P9 on our website at www.digidirect.com.au. Take care, guys. Enjoy.